Welcome to MohawkAd, Tales from Mohawk Ad, the podcast for the Mohawk College advertising students. This time we'll have a former student from class of 2011, Eric Cicero, who's now an art director at ScotiaBank, and he will tell us since the beginning how he went to internship in California and LA, went to Doggett Partners in Ocean, Proximity, and Juniper Park to BWA, until he changed to work in-house at Scotiabank, and all those changes and amazing campaigns that Eric was involved with will be discussed here. Also, we have a student as this new format will be Estevan Ferrari, third year creative student, who will be participating on this recording also. All right, so let's start. Welcome to MohawkAd, Tales from MohawkAd, and today I have here a very special guest, a guest that I don't see in a while, but I also follow his career path on LinkedIn and through friends and alumni that I ask about him. Eric Cicero, art director at Scotiabank. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
All right, so just remember your class of 2011, so it's been 11 years.
Yes, already 11 years.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh God. Time goes fast. And
does, yeah.
Today we also have a third year creative student, Estevan Ferrari. So how are you doing, Estevan?
I'm pretty good. How's it going?
Good. All right. So let's start. I want to ask you, Eric, one question that I also always had. What made you go to computer engineering at the college and then completely shift to advertising? Tell that story to us.
Yeah, for sure. I know it's always I've told the story many times, especially to people I've worked with in advertising, and it's not a crazy story, but it's interesting to me because I growing up I was always a very creative kid, and I loved coloring and drawing things and creative writing and things like that. But for some reason, I never pursued that as something that I thought could be a career. And then once I was like nearing the end of high school and things like that, when you sort of have to choose a path, I was always interested in computers and did a lot of stuff. Interestingly enough, I learned Photoshop and things like that before I even went to advertising. And but I thought I know how to take apart computers and put them back together, and I'm really interested in technology. So I went that direction, and I was kind of heading into the IT field. And once I did some work placements and co-ops through the Mohawk program, I just remember distinctly there was a moment where I was like, this is not right for me. I'm interested in what I'm doing, but it was basically too boring for me. It was just like, it wasn't stimulating enough. It wasn't social enough. It just wasn't quite right for me. And so I went back and I thought about what the things that I like and the things that I'm good at. And I was like thinking, I definitely need to do something creative. And I went back to Mohawk for a 1-year program, the pre-media program.
Pre-media, yes.
Yeah. And from there, so pre-media was great because it touched on all the different things. I got to see, kind of get an idea of what the TV program would be about, or radio and journalism. And then there was advertising as well in there. And advertising was not on my radar at all. I had no idea what advertising was and what it involved. And I was leaning towards journalism and possibly radio. And then kind of at the last second, I chose to pursue advertising after the pre-media program. And it was sort of just in a way by accident. I didn't really know what I was getting into. And yeah, once I kind of joined the advertising program and started to learn, I was like, yes, I think I made the right decision. It was sort of by accident, but it sort of filled all those things that I was looking for.
Interesting. That it was
Yeah,
by accident,
pretty much. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
half accident. But yeah, oh my god. Okay.
Yeah.
So, how was your feeling on the first few weeks? To say that when you started.
Like once I was in the advertising program.
Once you started.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I think it took a while for me to kind of realize that I for sure wanted to pursue the creative side of things, because obviously that first year is you kind of get a bit of everything. Um, and interestingly enough, I actually was interested in the business side of it for a lot of it. I think it just in general it sort of piqued my interest in a way that I wasn't expecting it to. But then, um, uh, for sure, I definitely decided to pursue the creative stream, and yeah, it was definitely the right choice. I couldn't have imagined going the other way at this point, but but yeah, I mean, like that first year at Mohawk was really eye opening, and I just the learning more about what advertising entailed and the process of everything. It was really interesting. Yeah.
I remember through the projects that I remember from you, I remember saying to myself, "Oh my God, this guy not only have the skills already much better than the average student at this stage, much better. That you always have the eye for it. So not only you can actually execute, but you have an art director eye. So I noticed that since day one, and I see because you're being through the college system already, you have that maturity that I want to do this, and
Right.
this made the whole difference for me at least.
Yeah,
What is
definitely.
it?
I mean, I think it's for me. It would have been. I think I would have had a harder time with it if I came right into it out of high school, for sure. And I think it did help me to be a little bit older and kind of in that mindset that it was definitely the thing I wanted to pursue. So that, yeah, that definitely helped.
Well, I will tell you, everybody who's listening, Eric was one of the students who I sent to internship in LA with state. So tell about that whole process, Eric. So
Yeah,
if
I
you,
mean, that was great. That was going out there for 2 months. Pretty much changed my life. It was just a very eye opening experience for me. It was the first time I moved away from home, so it was just a completely new experience for me, and I kind of embraced it very very openly. And working at the agency was great. It just gave me an idea of what the process was to kind of work with a client and work through projects. And it was nice that it was kind of on a smaller scale at the time,
Mhm.
because it gave me a chance to work directly with clients right away, which was really cool. Um, and I did some stuff that I kind of wasn't expecting to do. I did a bit more design work, which I wasn't really thinking I would be doing, and that was nice to kind of touch on that. And it was a lot of like design and branding and web stuff, which um, yeah, which was kind of a bit of a different thing than I was expecting to do. So that was nice, as a foot in the door for sure.
How different was California from Ontario in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously the weather was better because I went there in March, so that was nice to kind of miss the end of winter that year.
Hmm.
It probably made me not like winter as much once I came back. But I did notice though very much that the people in California, in LA, were very similar to people here. Everyone was really nice there, and it wasn't like a huge culture shock. I mean, obviously the weather was different and things are different because it's the States, but um, it was a nice environment. And what was so great about also being down there for that amount of time, I ended up traveling up to San Francisco for a few days,
Mm,
and
nice.
um, that's where, because I know a lot of people from our program were going to agencies in Toronto and doing interviews with people and getting their books looked at. And I made a point of reaching out to some people in San Francisco, and I went up there and actually went to Goodby and Silverstein, and I talked to a few people there. I met with some people, I think it was at Sapient there.
Sapient, yes.
And I talked to someone else at BBDO San Francisco. So that was awesome, and that was a great first experience, especially at Goodby, because I was, it's such a huge name, and I was expecting to be very intimidated, and I was expecting them to be kind of, I don't know, almost like dismissive of me or something like that. But everyone was very nice to me, and I talked to actually 2 or 3 different people there, and they all looked at my book and they all gave me great feedback, and that was a huge turning point for me, for sure.
That's great to hear. How that kind of experience, it gives a shift in your mind, isn't it? Like,
Yep.
actually, yeah, people. It's just people. You just let them know that you exist and present their good book, and you have a chance to talk to them.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Because
so,
it really made me feel like, yeah, they're just normal people. They're just it was good. Yeah.
before I get into your next step, I want you to talk to me about your career as a DJ. Like your how was that part? Because
Yeah.
I think everything creative. I think if you talk about music, it's such a creative environment too. I think it's the same kind of a mold that you get into the process in your mind. So how was that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because it comes up once in a while, and I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't done that in so long. It's been, I think I basically stopped DJing just after I started working full time in advertising. So it's already been about 10 years. But um,
It's a cool experience to remember.
yeah. Oh, it's
I
something that,
wish I wish
yeah.
I had that time in my life when I was a DJ. But tell a
Yeah.
little.
I mean, it started as a hobby for me, and it was something that um, yeah, it was completely a hobby, and I sort of just again sort of accidentally made a connection with somebody at it was a club that was close to Mohawk there, called O Lounge, and it was I started doing some gigs there for private parties and things like that. But generally, it was mostly a hobby, and it was kind of just like a side gig that I did. But what I learned through that was just like mixing music and song selection and things like that. That really has, something like that has stuck with me to into advertising, because it's really helped me when it comes to like what music means for people and things like that. So um, yeah, even though it was just sort of like a hobby that I was interested in, it's something that has really affected even my work to today. Like even just yesterday, I was searching for some music for a video, and it's just finding the right song is so important in spots and videos, and um, yeah, something like DJing is a huge influence on that.
It's great to hear. That we can go to the next part of it. That how was the work at Proximity? How was the getting that gig and work almost 3 years there at
Yeah,
Proximity Canada?
absolutely. Yeah, so that was yeah. That was a great first experience. Like I couldn't have asked for a better agency to start at the time, because it was Proximity BBDO. They were
Yes.
the basically partners, and Proximity was the kind of the digital side of BBDO.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as a junior going in there, it was BBDO was at their height, with Peter and Carlos on the creative side, on that side, and then Proximity had a few good creative directors that had a great influence on me. Um, I worked very closely with Josh Stein at the time. He was my CD for most of my time there, and yeah, I got the interview actually through. I was recommended by Ryan Chason, because he was working at BBDO
Right.
at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a job there as a junior art director, and they put me right onto one of the biggest accounts. I started working on Gillette right away, and working at Proximity, because it was digital first, it was lots of production work and lots of banners and things like that. Especially 10 years ago, it was mostly things like that.
Most definitely, yeah.
Social media wasn't huge. It wasn't, you would do Facebook stuff and things like that, but it wasn't to the extent it is today. So it was a lot of versioning and things like that. And it made me like, it's one of those things where I think we probably all say this, where the first 3 months that I worked there, I learned more than I did in the 3 years that I was at Mohawk. And it's one of those things that once you don't really understand the whole process and everything that goes into it until you're in the middle of it. And getting on Gillette was huge because it was like such a big account to be the first thing I worked on. And yeah, it was just a great experience across the board because I got to do a lot of design work. I got to do some concept work. I got to work with production teams. I got to work with web development teams. Like, it was just right off the bat, it was a really great experience. And the team there was just very helpful in mentoring me and getting me used to what it takes to kind of stick around in advertising.
Yeah, I agree with you that there's a huge jump when you go into a workforce from the college. You think you're in third year, like I know everything already. I can do this.
Yeah.
You can as a starting junior, and then somehow you learn so much, and in 6 months look like 5 years
Yeah, exactly.
on content stuff.
Yeah.
But I want you to talk about that amazing campaign, the We Are Winter,
Yep.
that he did there.
For sure. Yeah. So
If you guys remember, is the for the which Olympics was the
it was for the 2014 Olympics.
Winter Olympics? Okay.
And yeah, Sochi. And
Sochi. Okay.
yeah, so I worked on this campaign for the Canadian Olympic Committee, and basically it was it was interesting because they opened it up to kind of the whole agency, and it was my first experience with sort of competing for a project.
Okay.
Which doesn't happen as much these days, I don't think. But it was something that would come up once in a while, especially if it was a high profile project. So they kind of put the whole agency on it. And I was lucky enough to be working with a senior writer at the time, even though I was a junior.
Mm-hmm.
And we came up with this idea, We Are Winter, and it was picked over everyone else's idea in Proximity. And yeah, and we went to work on it, and it was my first like full mass media campaign with everything. It was obviously like a little bit different as a junior kind of going into that, because I unfortunately didn't get to go to the actual shoot for the videos and stuff like that, because it was limited budget with the Canadian Olympic Committee and stuff like that. But the whole experience from top to bottom was just amazing for me, because I'm a huge sports fan. So that was like just crazy for me to work on that right away so early in my career. And then being able to see through this project that was going to be so high profile, from beginning to end. We did so much work with photography and retouching and and creating all these assets for across the board. And I mean, the idea of We Are Winter ended up being this thing where we wanted to put a whole different lens on sports marketing. And we found these Canadian poems that related to winter, and we matched them with this really moody footage and this moody imagery. And the what came out of it was so interesting and artsy and just not what you would expect. And it was just such a highlight of my career. And it's even though it was in the first 3 years of my career, it's still like basically the best thing I've ever done.
that campaign, it is really something. It is like it doesn't get old,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Yeah,
that's the fact of a good campaign. If it doesn't age,
for
it,
sure. And
it,
the interesting thing about We Are Winter for me was that it kind of it lived on for a few years. I remember checking Twitter and checking Facebook the year after and the year after, and people were still using the hashtag We Are Winter for just random,
I see.
just being Canadian and being
Hmm.
enjoying winter. They would use the hashtag, which is obviously a testament to the messaging.
Yeah, for the students who are listening, just search for Will Winter Canadian Olympic team on YouTube, and you're gonna see the amazing campaign. Or check the Eric's website that I will give in the end of the podcast to take a look on that campaign. It was astonishing. Uh, so from that campaign and the work on proximity, so you have that amazing experience there. You went down to Enocean. Tell me
Yep.
about that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, so I moved on to an ocean after proximity, and I think, as most people know, an ocean is specifically cars. It's Hyundai and Kia. So I
Uh-huh.
worked on the Hyundai side, and it was my first experience with cars. I think most people at some point in their career touch cars. So it was a great way to get into it because it was a smaller agency, and it was a smaller agency, but they act like a big agency. So the way their processes are and the way it kind of feels when you're there. But being on a smaller team was great because I was immediately a go-to team. So we worked on all kinds of stuff, and yeah, I mean, cars are a whole different beast because there's the brand side, there's the retail side, and there's all kinds of different ways in
So
at
question
cars.
from for what is the difference between expectation from regular and like a student like, oh my god, I'm gonna work on a big brand car brand,
Yeah.
and actually reality. So
Yeah.
what do you could tell?
Yeah, I mean, cars are tricky because they go through cycles, and um, the opportunities for creativity really depend on what kind of car, what kind of brand it is, which car it is. Is it a new model? Is it just a refresh of a model? Is it uh, what's going on in the world at the time? Because like when I worked on Hyundai, SUVs were suddenly becoming the go-to car.
Hmm.
So the one spot I did while I was there was for the Hyundai Tucson, and that was such a big deal. It was this launch of this small. It was the small SUV, and they kind of never existed before. And so they wanted to have this big launch of what it is, and kind of get people to yeah to buy into these small SUVs. So yeah, I mean, cars are, it's kind of it's a huge beast because they have uh, they need to sell cars, but there's yeah, there's opportunity for creativity. They have um, like there's different ways that they want to get the message out to people, because there's so many different types of cars and so many different ways in that. Yeah, I mean, like it's a good experience to have because they're such big brands and there's so many different moving parts. So once you kind of work on a car brand, I feel like you can work on anything basically.
I see. Is that kind of a okay?
Yeah.
Well, from Innovation, you went to Dog and Partners. Uh,
Yeah.
let's talk
So
about it.
yeah, for sure. So Doug and Partners, interestingly enough, I spent the least amount of time there, but I have the most amount of work
Oh,
in my
okay,
book from there.
okay.
So uh, going there it was a really good opportunity because again, it was another small team, but it was a wide variety of clients. So it was kind of the opposite of an ocean, where I was working through just the one brand in an ocean, but at Doug and Partners, I got to work on uh, Good Life and York University and Honda, which is also obviously a car brand, but
Mm-hmm.
um, it was a great opportunity because the team was so small. So you were working on larger campaigns no matter what. It was always you were always kind of there was only like a handful of teams. So um, yeah, so I mean I think while I was at Dog and Partners is when I learned how to craft my work a bit better,
Mm-hmm.
because you're under the microscope when it's a small team.
I see.
It's there's nowhere to hide. I think at a place like Proximity or a bigger agency, you can kind of fly under the radar, maybe um, uh, get by with some work that's not not so great or whatever, just like kind of fly under the radar. But at a smaller agency, you have more motivation to kind of craft your work. And they were also really great about giving us time to do the work. The clients were really good. Like, I mean, I remember working on Good Life, and they were probably the nicest clients I've ever worked with. They were just so appreciative of all the work, and they had such close relationships with their clients because it was a small agency. That was nice. You got a lot of face time with the clients. It's definitely where I learned how to up my presenting skills and talking to clients and building those relationships. And then, like I said, also crafting the work a bit more.
So you're telling me a lot of like good things, not up and downs, good things and bad things about big agencies, smaller agencies, and
Yep.
everything. Uh, exactly like the clients. Do you think this relationship with the clients closer to the client make better projects?
Usually, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's always nicer when the team who is creating the work has the face time with the clients. Um, at bigger agencies, it tends to kind of sway to the creative directors. The higher ups usually have more of the face time with the clients. I think. I mean, I think that maybe has been changing depending on which agency you go to. But generally, absolutely, if you have a closer relationship with the client, and you, especially as an art director writer team, if you have more face time with the client, typically you get better work in the end.
How was your mind at the time? Because you work on big agencies in small places, California. How was it at the time? Like, what would be my perfect place to work on your mind?
I know. Honestly, I didn't really know, and I don't think I ever really figured it out. Yeah, I mean, I was always open to anything. I think I always thought I wanted to work at big agencies, um, um, and I did enjoy it when I did. Like, even we haven't talked about it, but when I worked at Juniper Park too, that was a bigger agency. But
It's coming. Yeah.
yeah, but I think there's yeah, I mean, it's there. A smaller agency is great because you're in that environment that's, like I said, there's more motivation to kind of push yourself because the pressure's on all the time.
Mm,
But it can be exhausting too, which I kind of did find with it did sort of wear on me at Dug and Partners at times.
hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I would definitely uh, yeah, I would definitely suggest that students try to think about that. Maybe you try both and see what feels right,
I see.
because they're just completely different beasts.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Going to Juniper Park, then it was you saw the transition between with GBWA, the join, was it?
I joined just after the transition,
Just
so
after the transition.
yeah,
Okay,
um, after they merged.
they
So
merge. Yes.
yeah, so I think it was probably about 2 years after they merged, then I joined there. So I missed that, but I did go through quite a few um, leadership changes while I was there.
Hmm.
So that was interesting because it sort of forces you to um, reset often, which is good motivation. You're sort of trying to, for lack of a better term, like impress the new
I see.
creative directors and things like that. So it gives you sort of this even though I was there for 3 years, it probably felt like I was at three different agencies in 3 years in a way, which is good in a lot of ways. Obviously, stability is nice, but I did find some stability there where I worked. I ended up going back onto cars, and I ended up working on Nissan for most of my time there. So I did touch CIBC and New York Fries and some other stuff too while I was there, but then I ended up spending most of my time on Nissan, which was interesting because I had previous car experience, but I sort of, because I had refined my skills between the time I was at Enocean to going to Juniper Park, I was looking at Nissan totally differently. And
How come?
Well, because I was in a better creative space. Like I was more confident about my skills and about my my ability to bring the strategic thinking and the branding and the design. So one of the things that I really focused on with Nissan was that branding side. And I remember when I started working on it, things were kind of all over the place with in terms of like the retail design and the display banners and things like that. And I spent a lot of my time honing that in. I ended up being basically the go-to art director on the Nissan account, aside from the ACDs. So, so I think bringing all that experience from the other brands back to cars was really nice. And and so basically we worked on kind of rebranding the whole retail, the whole retail side of things while I was working on it.
That's a huge project.
Yeah, it was huge.
Well, I will ask you this: going through the different agencies and that experience, how difficult it is to adapt to different people, different egos, different personalities, and have that kind of a personal skill. How hard it is, and what do you suggest to the students to think when you're going to this kind of work? Because
yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely tricky because there's a wide range of personalities in advertising. I mean, you definitely have to be open and willing to accept everything that's in front of you. Um, being being a being kind is very important. Being yourself is very important. I think you get further when you are genuine and kind to people, than trying to be somebody you're not, just to kind of get in good with somebody, or um, get on a certain project, or like things like that. Like I think it's to be genuine and kind goes much further, and I think that's worked out really well for me. And I think that just it makes it easier dealing with the different personalities because they see who you are right from the start, and you're not trying to kind of like find a way in the side door to like get on a certain project or do things like that. So
I see.
I think it's also very important to set boundaries, because especially the some of the experiences I had to deal with where it was a lot of leadership changeover. You're trying to figure out like, are we going to change the way the whole creative department works now? Is it going to be, or do we have to expect later nights or bigger, like I don't know, like bigger emphasis on awards or something like that? Like there's all those different things you have to that come up when there's new leadership, and setting boundaries was always a big thing for me because um, I knew from early on in my time of proximity that I didn't love working super late. I didn't do well under that kind of pressure and things like that. So I was able to, from an early time in my career, I was able to kind of figure out what my boundaries were in terms of my work-life balance, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of worked within that. And I think once I tried my best to kind of keep that work-life balance as much as I could. Obviously, it's advertising and things are urgent, and projects blow up, and there's pitches and stuff like that. But generally, I think it's gotten better over the years. And even once I was at Juniper Park, um, it was pretty much a 9 to 5 job for the most part. So things are getting better that way, but I think it's still important to set those boundaries and figure out what you're comfortable with, because the leadership and the agencies will work with you. You
Yeah,
don't have to feel like you're forced into being a certain way, kind of
um,
thing.
that's amazing. I I really agree with you 100% on that point. But I have a parallel question to that. You
Sure.
have the pandemic remote work
Yeah.
help it or even make it worse because people expect you to work at your own place?
Um, yeah. So it's tricky to answer that question for me a little bit, because I started working at Scotiabank right as the pandemic started.
Okay.
So Scotiabank is a completely different beast.
Okay, so let's go to client.
Yeah,
So you left Juniper Park and went to client side
yeah,
on Scotiabank,
right.
and completely different environment. I agree with you.
Yep,
Before you say that, let's say guessing if you're still in an agency, do you think
yep.
in the agency life there's this will accentuate or this will be better now?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've heard from other people, I think it was really tough. It was a really tough adjustment at first,
Mm-hmm.
um, in those first few months, or maybe even the first year. I think people were working harder than they ever had worked before, with less work-life balance. But I think generally things have gotten way better. And I mean, I think to like thinking of it from the student perspective, there's absolutely value in going into the office and talking to people and being in the office with people. But I think working from home does have its benefits. And I think if I was still at an agency, I would absolutely be pushing for working from home part of the week. Um, I think there's lots of times where you need to put your head down and just do the work and think of ideas and design things and do stuff like that. And without the distractions of the office, it really helps. But obviously, it depends on your personality, and everyone's very different, the way they work and the way they interact with people.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think in the agency world, if you're a junior, I think even if you're working from home, work reaching out to your leadership and reaching out to your creative directors or other coworkers, and
Mm-hmm.
having meetings on the side, things like that, I think would be really helpful even if you were working from home. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's it's tricky because I couldn't really imagine what it's like being a junior, kind of coming into this new way of working.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because I think it's much easier when you're well established to sort of sit at your computer all day and just do your work.
I agree.
But when you're trying to learn from people, it's yeah, it would be a little bit hard.
How was that transition then from agency life and say I will work client side now with one of the biggest banks in Canada?
Yeah, it was a hard decision. The opportunity sort of came to me very randomly, as they usually do, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, sure, I'll go for the interview. I'll see what it's like. Even at the time, uh, when I went for an interview, it was still kind of like, oh, you're selling out. You're not going to do creative work. It's like going to client side was sort of like ending your career in advertising as it was, and you're kind of moving on to something different in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so going into the interviews, I was sort of hesitant and wasn't sure what to make of it. But then hearing about some of the perks of just sort of that work life balance, and what Scotia was specifically trying to do with their creative teams
I see.
was what sold me, because just the idea that we would be able to work very closely with the marketing teams and build those relationships. And at the time, Scotia only had um, three creative people, like one writer, art director team, and one creative director,
Mm-hmm.
and then a production team, a very small production team. And basically, they sold me on the idea that we were going to grow this team. So yeah, so I mean, there's definitely some perks to go client side. There's usually a bit more stability and a bit more, you kind of know what to expect a bit more. And going to a bank, it's, I mean, it's not a bad place to be.
Mm-hmm.
There, but yeah, I mean, it was still a hard decision no matter what, because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be as creative as I was at an agency. But
But at the same time, it's even harder, isn't it? Because you need to reinvent yourself with the same client. So
right, yeah. So I mean, I had a lot of experience working on a single client
Mm-hmm.
previously, so I wasn't too worried about that. But it's yeah, it's tricky because making that transition to client side, you sort of you feel like you're going to lose touch with the industry a little bit. Um, but so far, it's been a pretty good experience.
It's almost 3 years now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
guarantee they love you there, Eric. I
yeah,
have no doubt about that. I know your potential and your skills. I have no doubt, and you as a person. So I think any company or agency will be glad to have you there, 100%.
thank you.
Uh, I would say this. So we get to there's two other parts of this podcast now. This part now is where Stefan, our student part, they will ask you questions directly as a student, what he
Sure.
wants to know from you. Stefan, it's up to you.
Okay, then. So my first question is, with all the experience that you have right now, if you were interning for the first time for a job in an agency, what would you try to do in the internship to get the job?
To get the job. Yeah, I mean, when you're interviewing with your portfolio, it's really important to um, be able to explain your ideas very clearly and very succinctly. So I think it's like I think a big part of it. I mean, it sounds yeah. I mean, creative directors don't have a lot of time to fit you in for your interviews. Is very tricky for them, and it's they definitely want to. They have good intentions to spend time with you and talk through everything with you, but they really don't have a lot of time. So being able to clearly explain your ideas in a way that makes them feel like they're big ideas and really interesting ideas, it really helps to just really know your idea as well.
And when you start your internship, they hire you for the internship, you start at the agency. What would you try to do, like to show that you want to stay there, that you want to work there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, just putting your hand up for things that come up, always trying to go beyond what they give you, because often when you're a junior, you're getting the projects that no one else kind of wants to do, which is totally fair, and it's a great learning experience to learn that way. But there's always opportunity, and there agencies move so quickly that you're not really gonna get those opportunities unless you put your hand up and let someone know that you're interested. Um, and then the other thing is talking to people as much as possible. I'm very guilty of not talking to people in the first few years that I was working in advertising, and just sort of putting my head down and doing the work and thinking that no one wanted to talk to me because I was a junior. But everyone's very social in advertising, and everyone is willing to help. So reaching out to people and saying, can I have 15 minutes of your time to talk to you about whatever, anything, and finding a mentor or something like that's huge.
How do you, is it like, so how do you find a mentor? Is it like, do you come to somebody and say, can you be my mentor? Or like, does it happen naturally? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, it could happen both of those ways. I think naturally you'll probably find somebody that you relate to in some way, or you just feel more comfortable with, um, that you could talk to more often. But it could be as simple as literally asking them, "Can you mentor me?" Because I think even though agencies and people who work in advertising can be a little bit intimidating, especially because I think it's mostly because things are just, like I said, moving so fast all the time. So people seem like they don't have time to talk. People will make time. So yeah, it's just
Mm.
asking and finding the right person. I think it's easier than it seems once you're kind of in it. Yeah.
And
Go ahead, Steven.
another question that I have is, what subject in your book would you focus to get an internship? So, would you focus on the design of the campaigns, or the idea behind it, or the editing of the videos?
Yeah, I think if you're specifically looking for art director or copywriting, um, the idea is the most important thing for sure.
Hmm.
Um, Making sure that it has uh, um, a very strong strategic point of view, and the idea feels big or feels very uh, well thought out is really important. But I mean, craft helps obviously, being having a great design on the ad, or some really great headlines or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think being able to show a breadth of different uh, like different things, like web design, or how it could work um, on a website, or like a website, or social media, or things like that. I think it's like, if you can show that an idea has legs, it can live in more than one place, that really can kind of show how big an idea can be and how well thought out it is. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really a perfect answer to it.
Hmm.
But if the idea is strong, I think you'll kind of be able to really bring it to life in your book.
One more question, Steven.
So my last question is, what is the most effective way to get an internship? Is it like through LinkedIn? Is it to networking, getting, like, I know Rap and he knows somebody that he connects us, or is it like, I don't know, showing up at the agency and like just showing up with your book?
Yeah. I think, I mean, connections obviously help. But yeah, I mean, if you can reach out to people on LinkedIn, that's great. I think even back when we were doing this, it was very similar, where we just kind of had to reach out to people, sort of cold call them, or cold message them. And I think it's just trying to be really um, like try to keep your messages short and sweet, but also well intentioned. So like being very going back to the being kind and being uh, um, genuine about it. I think it's yeah. I mean it's yeah. I think it's you just need to sort of put yourself out there, and there's people are willing to help you for sure.
Okay, thank you.
I got about two questions on that subject.
Sure.
I guarantee you saw hundreds of books through all those years.
Yeah.
What is the biggest mistake you see regularly from students that you want to, like, if I could tell the teacher, stop doing this, I would say that. What do you would say?
Um, That's a good question. I think, I think students probably tend to over design things. So just keeping it simple, like making sure just kind of going back to what I said, making sure the idea shines through. So like I understand like some students want to show off how good they can Photoshop something or whatever, but yeah, just making sure the idea shines through and something isn't overproduced. And it works. It comes to videos too, like because I know a lot of students have videos in their portfolios now. So yeah, just not over producing stuff.
So, and then my question is, could you tell me your fondest memory at Mohawk? What's the stuff you remember the most of in the program? A few things here.
Yeah, I mean, the I just like the best part of it for me, especially coming from the background I had before I went to advertising, was the social aspect of it. It was very the everyone was very just everyone wanted to be together all the time, and you kind of couldn't help it because of the way the projects were and things like that. It was very collaborative, and working in the Mac lab and being around everyone, working through all the same projects and doing going out and doing photo shoots and getting things like figuring out how to use all the different programs, and we sort of just like we were forced in a good way to be social. And I think it really showed in how many people we stayed friends with after the program, which is pretty amazing. And I feel like that's happened even I know some people from a couple of years after I graduated, and you can tell that even those groups of people, they have friends from Mohawk that they really stay close with. And I think advertising specifically, that program, because it can be high pressure, it can be lots of work, but it's totally worth it. And I think you build a lot of great friendships out of it for sure.
Stefan, do you want to say something before I go to the final words?
I'm good. Just thank you for answering all the questions.
Thanks for the questions.
Okay. So, any final recommendations? I will have this question. What is the saying that you will recommend when it comes to presentations? When people need to present, I think that's a skill that we are trying to reinforce at Mohawk right now.
Yeah,
And but what kind of advice you give on slides and deck and be prepared, that kind of stuff? What?
for sure. Yeah, I think the thing that's most relevant to me that I could pass on is being prepared. So I struggled for quite a few years with presentations because I would notice that I would lose my place or kind of forget something that I wanted to mention in the presentation. And there's no there's no shame in bringing notes to a presentation. There's no right or wrong way to do a presentation or prepare for a presentation. So find what works for you for sure. But I find that rehearsing a little bit ahead of time, going through your work, preparing notes, um, making sure you find the things that you need to hit on the most, and yeah, just being prepared ahead of time and not just necessarily winging it will really help you, especially in the first few years. Obviously, some people develop great presentation skills where they can wing it from top to bottom all the time, but in those first few years as a junior, you're definitely going to want to prepare.
Okay. One twisted question right now. How on those all those years, what is your method besides the brand regular typefaces to choose a font for a project?
Choosing a font. Yeah, I mean that's a weird one in a way because most brands are so strict on their guidelines
Mm-hmm.
that we often don't have a chance to choose fonts for a project. So
That's the
it's
reason I said, besides the guidelines, when you
yeah,
have the chance to do that.
right. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
That's fine.
So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean when I have the chance to do it, I mean it depends what kind of mood you're trying to express and what the point of the project is. So like if it's yeah, I mean there's actually it even works within brand guidelines sometimes where um, if it's something to do with hockey, then you're gonna want something that feels like it relates to sports, or if it's something to do with kids, you want something a little bit lighter feeling and things like that. Yeah, I mean it's hard. It's a bit hard to work with new fonts these days because they need to work on websites and they need to work. They often need to be
for sure.
very flexible
Mm-hmm.
um, and there's a trend because things are trending towards more simplicity. Um, there's always this appetite for something really simple and really uh, straightforward, but
Mm-hmm.
when you do notice the pieces that come out when they have a bit of a different fun font or something that's a bit more specific to the message, it definitely stands out. So
But yeah, it's so
yeah,
hard to find that final line between simplicity and something that pops up a little bit more
yeah,
and tells something. Yeah.
yeah.
Eric, thank you so much for your time. I cannot express. Thank you, Estevan, to
Thank
get you in here. We're coming back in 2 or 3 weeks with another episode. We have 2 more episodes until the end of the year. Besides Eric, Cicero here. Can you tell you how people can contact you, Eric?
Sure. Yeah, I
So,
mean, you can check out my website, eric-cicero.com, and my LinkedIn is on there, my Instagram is on there. I think I even have my phone number and my email on there. So everything is on my website. And yeah, I mean, feel free to reach out with any questions.
amazing. I think it was a great conversation and nice to see you after so much time. We need to gotta grab a coffee one of those days too.
Yes,
Okay.
I live in Hamilton, so
Yeah,
anytime,
yeah.
let
Well,
me know.
that's even easier.
Yep,
Okay.
perfect.
All
Thanks for
right.
having
So
me.
everybody, thank you for Rapscast here. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.